Welcome to today's episode, where we're diving into an important question for many veterinarians. Should you build a practice from the ground up or buy an existing one? Practice ownership is a major milestone, but the path to getting there is not always simple. From startup costs and financing to operations, staffing, systems, and long-term profitability, there are many decisions that can shape the future of a veterinary business. Today, we're joined by Mira Johnson, CPA, CVPM, MBA, Integrator at CPAs for Veterinarians, JF Bell Group. Mira is a finance and operations leader who helps veterinarians start, manage, and grow the practice of their dreams. With deep experience in accounting, budgeting, auditing, leadership, and veterinary practice management, she brings a practical and financial perspective to one of the biggest decisions veterinarians face. In this conversation, we will explore the pros and cons of starting a de novo veterinary practice versus buying an existing one, what veterinarians should consider before taking the leap, and how strong financial systems and real-time data can help new practice owners make smarter decisions. Mira, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here.
Thanks, Angie. I'm glad to be here.
So let's start with one of the biggest decisions aspiring practice owners face as they begin exploring the path to ownership. So for veterinarians dreaming of practice ownership, how should they decide whether to start a de novo practice or buy an existing one?
That's a great question. And I wish there would be an easy answer for that, but it really depends on individual needs, their personal goals, of course, their financial resources, and then also on where they are at their life and what their visions are. Because if we're envisioning something that's not out there, it will be really hard to buy it. But if we're envisioning something that's already out there and we can just purchase it and head on with the cash flow that's already there, that might be much easier. So it really comes to their risk tolerance, to their financial resources, and to their personal visions.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what are the biggest advantages and risks of starting a veterinary practice from the ground up?
Well, from the pros, there's so many pros. When you start from scratch, you just have a blank canvas. And it's so exciting because you get to design your own practice. There is the workflow that you always dreamed about, the number of exam rooms that you always wanted to have, the practice management software that you are comfortable with, and you get to hire your own staff. So there is not going to be anybody who you might not like because you get to pick them yourself. So there's a lot of pros on that. Now, as far as the cons, there are a few, and that's probably why many people will go with the buying an existing practice, because there's some drawbacks. One of the major one is that there was no clients. On the day one, you might not have anybody on your books, and that can be tough. So feeling a little bit low on the first week when there is just few appointments and the cash is not trickling in as fast as you would want to necessarily, the path to profitability. We see anywhere from 6 to 12 months till the practice gets profitable. So it's a long journey. And what that causes is you have to be patient, and oftentimes the owner's compensation is delayed. So there has to be some cash to fall back on, and also working capital to make sure that you can carry the costs in those not profitable months. So you can cover at least your labor costs and your cost of goods sold. Mm-hmm. So that's something that definitely anybody who is starting from scratch should consider.
That's really, really interesting. So when buying an existing practice, what financial and operational red flags should veterinarians look for before committing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one of the cons of buying an existing practice is you're going to pay for it much more than for a startup, because you are buying a goodwill. You're buying a set of clients, proven processes, established location. So that costs extra money. And that is definitely going to add to the loan that you will have to be paying compared to de novo practice. So it might be a higher loan, but you also have a cash flow that's established. But the red flags to watch for is I always recommend that there should be a valuation done. It is always between the seller and the buyer to agree on the purchase price. But if there's not a starting point, it's kind of hard. That would be the valuation. And there's so many different valuators in the market. So I always recommend a veterinary specific valuator because practices are evaluated differently. And then, of course, with the corporate market out there, investment value that the corporation would buy a practice are way different than an associate is buying in. So watch out for that because that is completely different math. And you want to make sure that you're not overpaying and that you're paying for everything that you know that you're paying. So I always talk about due diligence and hiring a professional to make sure that you understand what the financials look like. Also walking into the practice and see, is this the right practice for me? Does it fit what I'm looking for? Because there's a lot of practices, they're great practices. They're just not a good fit for some veterinarians or some future practice owners. So if you walk into the practice and you see that people are doing 10, 15-minute appointments and it's a low-cost vaccination clinic, and you imagine this high-tech, high-touch, different type of practice, it might be really, really hard to make that change. And you might lose a lot of clients in the meantime and cash flow and pretty much the goodwill that you pay for. So I highly recommend watching for those red flags.
Could you maybe elaborate on the red flags that you mentioned a little bit so that the listeners have a better understanding?
Yeah. So some of the red flags are the culture doesn't match what you want, what you're looking for. The other thing is the real estate. Maybe it's not in the location that you imagine you're going to be because you're going to be pulling from the people that you already know, perhaps. Or it might be inside of your non-compete if you're in a state that still has a non-compete. So make sure that you look into that. From the real estate perspective, another red flag would be to ensure that the lease is transferable. Sometimes you come to the deal and at the end you can't transfer the lease because the landlord is giving a hard time for whatever reason. Is there clients and demographics that you envision? If you are in a demographic area that doesn't match what you're trying to achieve, that's going to be really hard because people will have to drive farther. And we all know we're all about convenience. So who wants to drive that far anyway? So culture, demographics, location, and then, of course, the financials, making sure that there's nothing that would make you wonder, does this really cash flow and can I pay the loan? And is this what I want?
That's really interesting. I think that's something that a lot of practice owners or also veterinarians who are looking to buy a business would want to keep in mind. Mira, that's such an important point, like I said, because whether someone is starting from scratch or buying an existing veterinary practice, one thing becomes very clear quickly. Ownership is not just about getting the doors open, it's about creating a practice that can grow sustainably. And part of that growth comes from having the right financial guidance, but another part comes from making sure the right clients in your community can actually find you. So for veterinarians who are thinking about ownership or for current practice owners who want to better understand where their growth opportunities are, Veterinary Business Institute offers a free marketing strategy meeting. So during this session, Lila Stone and the team at Equa Marketing review your practice's online presence and prepare a customized marketing plan for your veterinary practice. They look at opportunities to improve your local visibility, attract high-quality new patients, strengthen your Google presence, and create a more consistent flow of new patient calls. Now, this is especially valuable for someone who is preparing to start or buy a practice because marketing should not be an afterthought. It should be part of the business. It should be part of the business plan from the beginning. So, if you want a clearer picture of how your practice is showing up online and what can be improved, you can book a complimentary marketing strategy meeting through veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM. Once again, veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM. All right. So we've talked about the key considerations involved in both starting and buying a practice. So for someone listening today, the next question is often how to turn that dream into a concrete plan. Mira, for someone who is listening and thinking, this sounds exciting, but I don't know where to begin. What are the most important first steps that they should take when preparing to start or buy a veterinary practice?
That's a good question, Angie. And we always ask each veterinarian or each future practice owner, because we know that it doesn't have to be a veterinarian now to start a practice.
Yeah.
One really important question, and that is why? Why do you want to be a practice owner? Why do you want to own a practice? Because owning a practice is not just be your own boss, but it's a lot of responsibilities, lots of decisions that person will have to make. And I do believe that not everybody is a practice ownership material just because a lot of people enjoy practicing medicine or they're much better in their role. And we hear a lot when they say, well, I want to change because I don't like the practice manager in my own practice, or I hate the software, or I don't like the turnover. We had a practice owner and she was frustrated. I'm sorry, not practice owner. I was an associate and she was really frustrated because she was working in a very busy practice. She had 15-minute appointments and the staff turnover was high. And she was thinking, you know what, I can just do this on my own. I can do better. And she did. She was very determined. And 8 months later, she leased a place, started a de novo practice, and was in her new facility. And it was like dream come true. And she was able to have 30-minute appointments. She picked her own staff, and it was all that great stuff that de novo offers. But she wasn't a very good businesswoman, and she didn't really pay attention to her cash flow and all the other things that practice owners need to work on, not just in their business, but on their business. And pretty soon she was running out of money. And 2 years later, she got in the crunch and she realized that she needs to see more appointments to get the money in the door. So she shortened her appointment times and she was doing 15-minute appointments. Her staff didn't like it. So what happens is, of course, they quit, found a different job, and she experienced a high turnover. So she was in 15-minute appointments with high turnover once again, but this time it was really hard because she couldn't just walk away. It was her practice. She was the practice owner. So I think there are reasons when practice ownership is not perhaps the right path. That if you're maybe just frustrated with your boss or you think that you're working in a toxic environment, I think there's so many great independent practices out there that have a great culture. They use the software that you love and they have a great team. So we always recommend try some relief. It's a great path towards learning what you like, what you don't, and maybe you'll find a great place for you to work at. And maybe you realize, no, this is really the right path. I need to create something special. Or maybe you find the practice that you're like, this practice is great. I just want to buy it. And it might be for sale. I don't know if that answered your question, Angie. I'm sorry. I just kind of went sideways on that.
That's all right. So once again, I'd like to stay on the topic for a little bit more. When a practice owner is, or someone who wants to buy a practice, they're thinking, where do I start? Where do I begin? What are the first steps that they should take when preparing to start or even buy a veterinary practice?
Yeah, thank you. So after you answer your why and you know for sure that you want to be a practice owner, I think the important part is to assess the financial situation. Can you get a loan? Are you financeable? And I think a lot of future practice owners or the ones that want to own a practice are waiting, thinking they can't afford it because they have big student loans. And there are good debts and bad debts. So like, for example, credit card debt is a bad debt. So you don't want to have those. But student loan and mortgage is a good debt because it's backed out by education and it's backed out by the house. So those are things that a lot of people don't know about. And in today's market, there is a lot of veterinary specific lenders that will lend startups. And if you are a veterinarian that's producing and has been in the workforce, the financial lending arms will lend you money just based on your production. And if you have a good financial habits already in place. So that's the first step, to see if you are financeable and if somebody will lend you the money.
Mm-hmm.
Now you might have your own stash, so you might not need the lender. Then it's really just start looking for location, or if you are trying to buy an existing practice, you can reach out to a broker or look at their listing to see what's out there. And if there isn't anything out there, you never know, because people might be thinking about selling. So you can start talking into the area and introduce yourself, go to the practice, buy the owner a coffee and see where they are in their journey, because they might be thinking about selling. They just haven't made that first step.
Mm-hmm. So they have to look into the first steps of the financial side and the location.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So once those first steps are in motion, how can better financial systems, real-time data, and strong advisory support help new practice owners succeed long-term?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think if you're going to do it on your own, it's going to be a really rough patch because you don't know everything. So having a strong advisory team is really important. And I always advise people to look for veterinary specific professionals. There is an organization called Vet Partners. That is the consortium of veterinary professionals. So you can find lawyers, you can find people who do demographic study, and marketing is really important as well. There's also people in the finance that will help with the due diligence when you're buying an existing practice. So I think, Angie, you hit it right on the head. Creating an advisory team is definitely going to help to get there faster and without avoiding some pitfalls.
Mm-hmm. All right. Mira, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight on what veterinarians should consider when deciding whether to build a new practice or buy an existing one. Practice ownership is an exciting step, but as we discussed, it also requires careful planning, strong financial visibility, and the right support team. Whether someone is considering a de novo practice or looking at an acquisition, understanding the numbers, the risks, and the operational realities can make all the difference. So, for all listeners who are dreaming of owning a veterinary practice, we hope this conversation gave you a clearer starting point and a better understanding of the questions to ask before taking the next step. Thanks again to Mira Johnson of CPAs for Veterinarians, JF Bell Group, for being with us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. So be sure to join us for the next episode as we continue bringing you expert conversations to help veterinary professionals grow stronger, smarter, and more successful practices.